Well, hello, Don't Die Rusty Nation. This week's guest is Devin Fish, and he's wrote a book called Answering the Hard Questions. Let it be the end of the chapter, not the end of the book. And we had quite a conversation. He is quite a story of resilience and change, and just this guy has gone through a lot in his life, and it was just one of those fun, interesting conversations, and I hope you enjoy this next episode of the Don't Die Rusty podcast with Devin Fish. Well, hello, Don't Die Rusty Nation. I have a guest on today, Devin Fish, that his life is, he's been through a lot. You've been through a lot of stuff in your life, and this will be an interesting story to tell. I can't imagine going through some of the stuff you've gone through, and just like Don't Die Rusty is about being the best you, living your best life, chasing your dreams, and your resilience is amazing, and that is what this tale is about, I think. I want you to tell you have a book out, The Hard Truths, is that correct?
So it's called Answering the Hard Questions,
Yep.
And then the subtitle is Let It Be the End of the Chapter, Not the End of the Book.
Yep, and where can people get that book? We'll put it in the show notes too.
So they can get it on Amazon. It's also on like Barnes & Noble online. I think I've seen it on most online stores. I don't know if it's been like in any physical shops yet because that's up to the store owners and stuff like that. But you can get it on like ebook, paperback, hardcover. You can get it on like Kindle, Kodobo, everything like that. So you can find it in most forms.
And you just told me you have a YouTube channel too. What is your YouTube channel called?
So no one took it yet. So it's so just like the book, and it also has the cover of the book. It's just called Answering the Hard Questions. So if they want to, hear more information that we don't get to today, like the first two episodes, it's like 50 minutes of me telling the story from start to beginning, and then kind of where I want to take the channel. It just started 3 days ago. I plan on trying to get something up there like at least once a day, whether it's like 2 minutes or like 20, 30 minutes. And what that channel is it's going to be pretty much a reflection of the book. It's to where I'm not like trying to, just talk to myself in the camera. I already admitted like on the second episode, I'm like, this is weird. But I actually want to be able to engage with the audience and ask them, some of the questions that I found in the book, and still some of the stuff that I'm doing right now because I'm working on part 2 of the book, and I'm already like 100 pages into that. So
Awesome. And you grew up in, is it Rockford, Illinois?
Yep, it is Rockford, Illinois.
A tough area to grow up in. I'm in here in. I grew up on a ranch in South Dakota, so it's a different lifestyle that you grew up in than I grew up in. So yeah.
Yeah. So Rockford, Illinois. I was born there, raised there for the first 18 years of my life. During that time, I had a pretty unstable life. I moved like 16 times before the age of 18. But on top of that, like Rockford has never been like a great city or really a state in general. Like even on the crime index, we're rated like 5 out of 100, meaning 95% of the United States is safer than Rockford, Illinois. So we have like the same rating as like Chicago, and like we're maybe right above like Detroit. They probably got like a few points less than us.
But you said moving I think you moved 16 times before you were 18.
Yep, so I moved 16 times before I was 18, and then I ended up joining the military. And then, so between like all my barracks moves and like my rotations, I'm up to like 30 moves. And I'm just 28 right now, so I've moved more times than my age.
Holy moly, that is amazing. Yeah. So, you tell us a little bit about your youth. I heard a little bit about your story, and I know about your mom and your dad. That I heard about, was it you were a senior? I think you were a senior or something, and you came home and your dad, they'd taken your dad, or well, just tell your story here. I won't try to tell it for you.
So I'll dive a little bit into my background, and then I'll go ahead and get into the story about my father, and then how it proceeds to the story of my mother, and then we finally get to me. And then, of course, if you have questions, just stop me, because sometimes I
Yep.
get into it and I'll go for like 50 minutes straight with this story.
Yeah, I'll stop you.
So I grew up in Rockford there for first there of my teen years, my life before I joined the Army. And then, so my instability, it wasn't just, houses or anything like that. So I lived in everything from a house, apartment, trailer, farm, all the way down to like a motel. I've lived with my mother for most of my life, but then I also lived with my father. I lived with two different aunts. I've lived with grandparents. I've lived with friends and family. So I did pretty much grow up in poverty as well, to where it's like sometimes our living conditions weren't great. So sometimes we didn't have like AC. Sometimes we didn't have like hot water. Sometimes we didn't have like a bathroom. That happened for like a couple weeks. And then, comparing myself to others, I always knew that I was kind of like poor even very early on, because they would have like iPhones and iPads, and I had like a flip phone and a CD player. So I was like a generation or two behind everyone else. And then I also moved back and forth between like 7 different schools. So I went to like 2 elementary schools. I went back and forth to 4 different middle schools, 1 high school. And, so that's just like a rough background. As a child, I was always pretty quiet. And then because of that instability, I became pretty much socially isolated, to where I wouldn't talk to anyone. So like if it required me to talk for like a presentation, I would just take the 0 every time. I'm like, I'm not talking to any of you. I would barely even respond to the teachers. And I was that, kid that I'm like, hopefully they don't call on me, because I don't plan on answering them.
Yep.
And then
it had to be hard to get friends.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, anyway, being social, like that too, and then moving so many times in different schools.
Yeah, so it's hard to keep friends. I didn't really have too many friends growing up. I could probably count them like all on my hands, depending on which location I was at. Sometimes I had more friends than others, and sometimes I didn't have like any friends at all. But for me, myself, my like last name is Fish, so that also didn't help. I was also like 120 pounds soaking wet, wouldn't talk to anyone. So it's like I had all the materials to be bullied. So
Yeah.
And the instability didn't help that.
So yeah, so then you get into you graduate from high school, or did you graduated from high school and went to the military?
Yeah, so right before I graduated, so that's when some of my stories started taking place with like my father and everything. So essentially what happened, it was the summer of 2016. I was about a month graduating high school, and then I was going to immediately ship to basic training right after that. So I get home after this bus, again, living with my father. I was probably in an apartment complex of about 20 or 30 people. And then I get off this bus, and the first thing I notice is that our apartment is swarmed with like police vehicles. So there's about 5 or 10 police vehicles outside the apartment. There's glass on the concrete, stuff like that. And, based on my life already, based on the instability to poverty and everything, I'm like that. Before I even walk up to the police, I kind of say in my head, I'm like, I'm not going to have a very good day, am I? So walk up to them, and, they confirm it. They're like, I give them my apartment number. They're like, hey, we don't want you in there. We don't want you seeing what's going on. So we're going to have to escort you off the premises. So they do that. They take me 2 miles down the road to where my aunt lived at the time, and then they started filling us in with some of the information, or filled her in with the information, because they didn't want me to have it, but I got a hold of it anyways. And what they told us was that he had to be tased, sedated, and then taken to the hospital for resisting arrest. So that's all the information that we had. So immediately once we got that, we pack our bags, we go see my father in the hospital. First thing we notice, his arms are like covered in scratches and blood and stuff like that, and then he's handcuffed to the bedpost. And immediately upon seeing us, he's trying to like almost get out of like the cuffs, trying to like turn around, because he doesn't want to see his family when he's in that condition, but he also had to see me, and he, no one wants to see their child look at them in that sort of condition or anything what was going on. So we didn't stay too long, and then once we got there, we got even more information. They're like, hey, the reason he resisted arrest is he was pretty much pumped full of adrenaline, because in his system he had a nasty combination of Fireball, whiskey, and cocaine in his system. So he essentially just exploded with adrenaline at that point. So I then had to go get my belongings from that apartment. And so the first thing my aunt says when we walk in that apartment, she's like, if we didn't just see your father, we would have thought he was just murdered, because that's how bad this apartment was once we entered it. So we open the door, everything is pretty much covered in blood and broken. So like the floors, the walls, the ceilings, everything had blood on it. And the first thing I imagined that was broken was probably a glass table, which is where would be where all the cuts came from and everything like that. But it wasn't just a table. We had like TVs, we had like laptops, refrigerator cabinets. All this stuff was like broken in, and it wasn't just one room. It was like almost every single room of the apartment, minus the room I was actually staying in at the time, which was untouched. So I think he had some sort of conscience there. But there was even like an AC vent that we had like hooked into the wall, and somehow he got that off the wall and like threw it through the window. And so that gives people like an estimate of like how much adrenaline and strength was going through his system, and probably what why even when he was tased, I think he still ran at him. So he was pretty hyped up at that time, and that was kind of like my first experience and like the first thing I tell people about when they're actually reading the book.
Yeah, because you. I mean, that wasn't your parents were addicted. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I would say they were both addicted to like drugs and alcohol. They had their different kind of drugs that they were attached to. But yeah, and I didn't know my father really did drugs until this happened, so that was kind of news to me. Although I could kind of now that I look back on my life and I'm like, okay, this was pretty obvious. He was pretty angry for about a couple years straight, and so this wasn't when I got off that bus I'm like, what's going to happen now? It's because this was building up, and there was reasons why I talked about it later in the book that I didn't really want to stay with him. And because after I stayed with him, this is immediately happens to us. Pretty much like this is within like the first week of me going to stay with him for like the first time.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Holy moly, that had to be a shock. I mean, I just can't imagine I can't imagine a child seeing their parent like that in that aspect, and then that happens, and how that would affect you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It did put a separation between us for a while. I would say that, and it definitely didn't help me because I was already going through a lot of things mentally. I think the only thing that kind of got me through that situation was like, okay, I need to keep going. I need to graduate high school, go to the military, and just get out of here. And so that is one aspect where the military helped me, because it literally helped me get out of that city and everything that was going on at that time.
And how did you choose the military?
Yeah, so odd enough, it wasn't my choice at first. It was actually my father's. So rewind to my junior year, I ended up failing out of honors geometry. He didn't take that well at all, and for like about a year straight, every chance we talked, he's like reminding me of that kind of like failure. And he was doing it from not like he was angry, but he was doing it from a place of love, because what he saw was that I was slowly becoming him, and that's absolutely what he didn't want to happen. And so when I failed out of this class, he's like, I'm done with your attitude. I'm done with all the things you've been doing. He's like, I've been really relaxed on you, but it ends here. And so essentially he's like, hey, you're going to go get a job. You're going to pay for this class. He's like, oh, your driver's ed, you're also going to pay for that. He's like, I'm not paying for anything else when it comes to like your schooling. He's like, you're pretty much on your own, and you're going to have to, start figuring life out. And from that point, he's like, I want to see all your job applications. You're going to get a job and you're going to do this. It's not an option. I'm forcing you to do it. And so what I would do, I would take a picture of my job applications, because I still wasn't living with them at this time. And then I would just throw them away, because I was pretty rebellious at this time. And then one day he's like, he just had it, because we're probably like months into it, and he's like, you still haven't had a job. So he's like, have you thought about joining the military? I'm like, sure, get him off my back and everything like that. And then so he pretty much called my bluff. He's like, all right, got his keys, and we went down the recruiting station. And it was kind of a win-win situation, because it kind of eased my dad up a little bit, because it kind of gave me a goal. And we've had this conversation a couple times in the past, but he's like, he kind of wished that he would have joined the military when he was younger, so that it would straighten his life out the way it's done mine. And so I think that was another one of those ways to where he was trying to push me away from his lifestyle and get me to go somewhere else. And so what that ended up doing, it kind of gave me some stability in life, to where I would go work out with them like once a week. It's called the late entry training program. And then that kind of gave me something to look forward to. It kind of gave me a reason to, try to graduate high school. And gave me an escape to get out of the city as well.
So, so that's quite interesting that you started working out again. And did it take a while to, after all that stuff and him telling you to go, you decide you're going to go to the military? Did that start helping your relationship with him? That time in between then?
I would say, we don't. I don't talk too often to him. We kind of have two completely different lives. But obviously, I love my father, and we try to have conversations and stuff like that. But there's definitely like no divide of what there used to be, because it was almost kind of like awkward, to where he was kind of becoming like a completely different person at that time, and he obviously recognizes that. But today, like 3 weeks ago, he put it on his social media, but he's like 6 years sober now, so he hasn't done like drugs and alcohol for like 6 years. So he's also changing his story right about now as well.
That is great to hear, because I mean, I've done a few more other episodes about addiction and stuff, and that's amazing to hear that when hearing the stories of being 6 years sober, that's awesome. I'm happy to hear that. So you're waiting to join the military, and what is your mother doing now?
So at the time, my mother was kind of like going through her own stuff. So before basic training, like I don't think she was doing alcohol at that time. Alcohol was more like earlier on in her story, probably like elementary, to where she was more like angry. But her big thing was she was on like a bunch of like pain medication, because she had back issues, because she injured her back because she was like a factory worker for a long time. But it ended up turning into more of an addiction, to where like early on I could tell she was like buying, selling them, and trading them. And then I also found out recently that she was also doing heroin during that time as well. And one of the things I kind of like noticed when people are on that like pain medication or the drugs or anything like that, it's like their characters like almost zombified, to where their mind is there, but their body's there, but their mind is completely gone. And one of the conversations we had, and this was like probably like maybe like a year before I went to join the Army, we were having like a conversation one day. She's standing up, I'm sitting down, and all of a sudden it just goes blank. So like she's standing up and her head starts bobbing back and forth, and she passes out while sitting up. And that kind of created like a divide between us for a while. And it wasn't just that was going on, but she also didn't have like a job, she didn't have like a car, her living conditions were quite poor, and this was going on for about 2 or 3 years now. But as I went to basic training, she actually started getting her life back on track. And by the time I got through basic training, I was in the basic training cycle for about a year, which is another incredible thing that I had to go through. Wasn't very fun. But by the time I got done with basic training, she had actually got her life back on track. So she had a car, she was at a new place, and from what I could tell, she was pretty much off the pain medication, minus the stuff she still had to take for like her back.
That is amazing, because if you want to talk about the basic training, because I know it happens during basic training. I think it was your third time through that. Was it true? If I'm right, so tell the people about your basic training experience then.
Yeah. So I know I spoiled it a little bit already. So my first basic training, I went to Fort Linderwood, which is in Missouri. I originally signed up to be a 68 Charlie, which is a nurse, for people who don't know military terms or anything like that. But I went there, found out I wasn't good at shooting weapons, failed rifle marksmanship. So about 4 or 5 weeks into the program, I got recycled. So then they send me across the street. I have to do pretty much everything over again. I get through the second basic training cycle, never failed rifle marksmanship after that. I learned my lesson. So my second cycle through, I passed. I then went to Fort Sam Houston to go do the 68 Charlie school. The first thing that happens when we get there, they're like, hey, this is a 70% dropout rate. Didn't know that when I signed my 6-year contract. Because, so essentially what they do in that nursing school is they cram 3 years of school into 1 year. Because they're just trying to push you through and get you through that training and get you out to the real army. So about 5 weeks into that, I had some personal issues going on, and on top of that, I just couldn't keep up with the material. So again, 5 weeks into that, I fell out of that, and then so I'm waiting for my next assignment. I ended up becoming a 19 Delta, which is a cavalry scout, kind of like the eyes and ears for the commander on the battlefield. So we're kind of like the first ones out there looking at terrain, where the enemy is, and stuff like that. And so essentially I waited like probably at least 2 or 3 months. I was just waiting on a bench pretty much every day. So while they're going to class, we either got put on details or we had just had to sit on the bench and just wait for the day to go by. And this was probably like 20 or 30 people that are with me. It's like all the dropouts that are just waiting for their next assignment or to go home if they're not going to make it. And then so from there, I go to 19 Delta School, but their OSET is linked with their training and their basic training. So then I went to basic training for the third time. Yep. So I got to go to basic training 3 times. Passed that one, and so through all this time, I was stuck in that basic training environment for about a year straight. Not very fun. You know, we start when the sun is down, and then we end when the sun is down. So it's like a full schedule, like hour by hour, everything is put on a schedule. And so it's really structured, and there's no freedom to it whatsoever. The only freedom you get is like when you're sleeping, but they determine when you go to sleep as well. And then, so right after my third time going to basic training, I finally I'm heading to my first unit, which is at Fort Hood, Texas. I was in reception at the time, getting my paperwork ready, and they're trying to determine which unit I was going to go to. So get a phone call from my mother. Nothing extreme. She just wanted to see how I was doing, how the unit was. And this was about 2 or 3 weeks from my birthday. And so she wanted to call me and wish me like a happy birthday just in case I got busy or anything like that. So probably 5-10 minute conversation. We say goodbye, say you love you. And then I get a phone call the next day from the Red Cross. They're like, hey, your mother's in the hospital. We need you to come back to Illinois because she's not doing well. So I go down there, figure out what's happening. And essentially what happened was the medication she was on had a bad reaction to her brain. And without knowing it, the medication fried her brain from the inside out.
Yeah.
I'm also the eldest son. So when I get there, I'm pretty much faced with the decision. They're like, hey, because you are the eldest son, you're going to have to decide to either keep her on life support or let her go. So I'm having that conversation with my aunt. I end up deciding to let her go. But as I'm making that decision, the nurse walks in the door and they're like, hey, there's nothing we can do. We're going to have to let her go no matter what your decision was. And so I have to go back, and pretty much heading to my first unit at Fort Hood, Texas, I had to sit there and watch my mother die. And that was really my first experience with the military, you know, after my father's incident, after the 1 year of basic training, and then heading to my unit, this happens.
So how long did you get to stay then during that time?
For the funeral, I think I went back and forth twice. I think I went for when she passed away, and then I came back for the funeral like a couple weeks after that. I think it was only a couple days each time though, but that was more of my decision. They said I could have taken more, but I wanted to get back to work because I didn't want to be around it, and I didn't really want to confront those feelings, so I kind of used work to push those feelings off and kind of move on from it.
Well, I understand somewhat. I kind of understand because when my mother died, I kept on having this thing that I wanted to talk to her. I thought, well, and we always talked on in the mornings usually, and I didn't get to chat with her. I mean, you know, I thought over a weekend I was going to just save up everything just to talk on the Monday, and then she died on the Monday. Well, it was actually Tuesday, but I never got to talk to her. But I kind of understand what you're going through, and I understand that you would, if you go, there's nothing really for you to do, and you're numb. You might as well go back to work, go back and try to work through things a little bit. So I kind of understand that part. So you went. So after that happens, what did you feel after that though? Did you? Because I know that you have found your faith. And did that bring a little more faith to you, or?
So not at the time. So I know you're referring to chapter 3. It's a section called "Going to War with God." It's actually my favorite section of the book, where I kind of reconcile my faith with my mother's death at the same time. So that happened right when I actually was writing the book. So writing the book actually helped me come back to the faith. So I wasn't like a Christian when I wrote the book. It was more of I knew there was something out there, and I was just trying to figure out what it was. And so it was more of a contemplation. And then when I actually finished writing the book, that is when I opened the Bible again, and that's where I found my faith. And then how I found my faith, I found it really quickly afterwards, actually from a quote that I wrote in the book, which is, "In truth you find redemption." I found a line, it's like John 3:21, that was almost like word for word how I felt when I was writing that quote. And that's actually what brought me back to the faith, because it's like, when I look back on my story, that's kind of when I saw God in it. And that's when I kind of started looking past the suffering, and I'm like, okay, well, sure, it was like suffering at the time, but now I can use these events to help other people. So maybe, and that's kind of really what turned the light on for me, is like when I stopped looking at my story of suffering, I'm like, okay, this is a story of hope now, because I have turned my life around.
And go ahead.
But yeah, so I definitely, it helped me, but it didn't help me for like 7+ years.
It's interesting. I went through a divorce, and actually that was more of a death than in that aspect. And when I went through that, I have a good friend, the pastor, Kelly Lovelace, and he helped me find my faith, because I thought, not that I didn't believe, it was just that I didn't know how to believe, or didn't have a direction. It was always told to you. It wasn't like if you had a question, it was here's the answer. There's no other questions to ask, and this helped me out. But and I remember, I can remember the day that I said, "God, here I am." I climb a mountain, and here out in the Black Hills, and I said, "Here I am." And when I came down, it was like, I know, I do believe now, and I know and I do understand. And then that helped me with my mother, when she died, that I climbed the same mountain and yelled at God and said why and all this other stuff, but I didn't stop believing. If you understand what I'm saying. So I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I kind of found faith in a similar way, to where when I was younger, my mom tried to force it on me, but it was like after she was gone, and I didn't go to church for 7-8 years after her death, because I was pretty anti-religious, very anti-religious. I wanted nothing to do with it for a very long time. But it was like when I kind of like opened myself up to believing, and then I went back to read the Bible, I'm like, oh, I just didn't know what I was talking about. I didn't know what I was fighting. Because, one of the big concepts that really sold Christianity for me is that I don't think anyone told me that they believed Jesus was God. I'm like, hold up. If Jesus is God and he came down here and then died for us, I'm like, this changes my entire outlook. I'm like, this is a cause worth dying for. I'm like, if God came down in human form and humbled himself, then it's like, I can die for that. And that was really one of the bigger concepts that really helped me come back to the faith.
It's funny how we have to suffer. I mean, you suffered a lot there, and it's funny how you suffer, and then you see this stuff. And I'm not saying we all suffer in different manners, but when we see this, and then you come back to the faith, and you know it's there. It's just amazing to me. So you go back to the military. I want because I like your story. It's interesting.
Yep. Yeah. So I ended up going back to the military. I went on a rotation to Korea, came back, did a detail at Fort Knox. It's like a short little summary. But so fast forward, so my mother's death was 2017. Fast forward to the year 2019, I find myself in a lot of trouble. The reason for that is that over the time of my story, so when I was young, I didn't really care about life. I knew this from that I was sleeping in my classes, failing out of my classes. You could very clearly see it. That ended up turning probably over to depression over the years. And then eventually in 2019, it got to the point where I'm like, I hated everything. So I hated the Army. I hated like family. I had people. But most importantly, I was able to identify that I absolutely hated myself. I could not stand who I was as a person and the life I was kind of living at that time. And the reason I think it got to self-hatred was maybe I look back at my life, I'm like, I was looking at all these things. Maybe I was like suffering because it was me. And so I put all that blame on me, essentially. And one of the things that I talk about now is like when that happens and I became full of self-hatred, I still wanted love. And so I started looking for it in other people, and that created a desperate ritual of where I would get into dating websites, but I never found any genuine people. The only people I found were like scammers, catfish, and people who wanted my money. And so I don't know how far you want to get into this, but so throughout the year of 2019, I ended up getting blackmailed like on several occasions. But here was the thing: it didn't happen overnight. But I knew they were going to blackmail me. I knew they were fake. But I would give them the money. I would give them anything they wanted. So if they wanted pictures or anything, I would give them all that, even though I knew they were fake and I knew that they were going to use it against me. But I was such in a desperate position at life that I just didn't care what they did to me. And like any kind of attention I got at that point, I would take it.
Well, I it's interesting because I talked about that divorce, and I got on dating sites too, and it's a tough battle to go through to find someone genuine, which is interesting because I met my wife actually on a dating site, and she's genuine, but it is tough because I saw those scammers too. It's funny how people don't have a conscience, and you also feel like you're selling yourself, and you want somebody to believe this is who you are, and it's a crazy deal. But yeah, I know you said it wasn't it one blackmailer helped you get rid of the other one, or the one that was...
Oh, yeah. So one of the blackmails helped me get out of one of them. So I was deep in the circle, and I'm almost like 90% sure that they still have my information, because occasionally I'll go back to a dating app site, I'm like, okay, let's see if anything changed. Within the first day, I'm like, someone comes back, I'm like, this feels like I'm about to get blackmailed again. I'll do it. Not to get blackmailed, but I'm like, I'm curious if they're about to do it, and because I can identify it from like a mile away just by like how they talk and stuff like that, and that's how good I got at the system. But I'm not dumb enough to like give them anything anymore. But yeah, so the first time I got blackmailed, it was a casual conversation. We ended up sending some photos back and forth, but when I stopped sending them money, then that's when they started blackmailing me. So, kept it casual until, they didn't get what they wanted anymore. So they got a lot of money out of me at the time. And then eventually they left me alone, and I went on to the next blackmail or scam or whatever you want to call it. And this person was absolutely vicious because, so we started a conversation, they sent a photo back, and they're like, hey, send me a photo back with your face in it. If someone ever asks you for like an exploitative photo with your face in it, red flag, you're about to get blackmailed immediately. Get away from it. And they will be persistent on that face. But I gave it to them, and within 30 seconds, so this is within 5 minutes of the entire conversation, they got my photo, and then they sent me a picture of my social media or my Facebook, and they're like, hey, I got your father, I got your mother, I got your entire family, and they sent me a screenshot of that, and they're like, send me money now, or I'm going to send it to them. And so the previous person that wanted my money, they came back, and I told them like the situation I was in, and they're like, yeah, delete your social media, block the person. They're like, they're not actually going to send it to anyone. They're just trying to get as much money out of you as possible before you cut the tie. And the reason they wanted that is they wanted my money instead of them. So
yeah. Yeah, I hear you. But that is just you try to find faith in the world, and that kind of stuff just drives me nuts that there can't be authentic, real people. I know there are, but I mean, it's just tough everybody wants to make easy money by hurting other people.
Yeah, they definitely pushed my faith journey back about 5-6 years. But actually, I would also say that, I'll continue the story. But the last one that actually changed me, and the reason I stopped like going back onto the dating websites for the most part, is that I got caught up in the worst possible blackmail you can get yourself into, which was the age scam. So we have a conversation. They swap their ages. At this point, I've already been blackmailed on several occasions. I could see this coming. I had that gut-wrenching feeling in my stomach, but I just did it anyways. I'm like, I don't care at this point. I'm going to send it anyways. So send them the photos. Next day, they're like, hey, this person's in the hospital, or that's what their story was. And they're like, we know you're in the military, so you can either send us money, or we're going to turn you over to the police. We're going to turn you over to the military, and then we're going to get you arrested and everything like that. And, kind of during that time, that was kind of like the real breaking moment to where I'm like, okay, this is real life now, to where really what that led to me thinking about was like how I was going to take my life, because this situation wasn't just, I'm sending some photos. It was like, this is possibly someone underage. This is possibly a teenager at the time. And that absolutely destroyed my mental. And so the only thing I could think about probably for like a month or two was like how I was going to take my life. And there was part of me, and I talk about this in the book, there was part of me that wished they almost sent it because it would have given me a reason to end my life. And I think I was looking for a reason at that time. And the only reason I survived is that I took it day by day, and I eventually sent myself to the hospital for suicidal intent.
Do you think they were? I mean, do you think they thought if they pushed you too hard, you would have never gave them any money anyway? Or because I understand where you're going with that. They're like, that would be the worst of the worst to think you're going to be. I mean, if that comes out, whatever would have happened, underage, then in jail, and all this other stuff is not a place that we want to go, and we aren't really. And you were.
I was probably 21, 22 at the time.
Yeah. And you're scammed, and you don't know this stuff, and there's no hope.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when this was actually happening, there was absolutely zero hope, and I 100% took it as, like, this was real. As I was giving them money, I kind of was, like, seeing the signs that this was probably not real. But, like, during the time of that initial, like, blackmail, I'm like, that's why I was considering killing myself, because I was like, what did I just do? But somehow all of that ended up leading me to the hospital. I got help, and that's eventually what actually, it broke me. And that's what actually helped me turn my life around. And I think I forgot what I said in the book, but I'm like, it's almost ironic that like the worst moments of our life are what help us turn it around for the better.
So yeah, it is. And so, do you know? I mean, it's funny how sometimes we realize that this was the moment that you decided that you needed to go to the hospital. Do you remember that moment? Like, this is it. I'm going to the hospital because I need to go to get fixed, or or whatever else. What made you decide that I need to go do this?
Yeah, so during that time, I was like a brand new NCO at the time. So I also had like soldiers under me. So I had a lot of other responsibilities going on at the time. So this is like on top, and these are all kind of like chain events as well. When like you look at my full story, these are all like from the start of my father all the way to this blackmail. It's like a series of 4 years to where almost something's terrible happening like almost every year back to back. And this is kind of what broke me at the time. And so I was going through a lot of stress at the time with just the Army itself alone. And so I was actually sneaking off, and I was going to see an MFLEC counselor, which is a military, family, and life counselor. And I went to go see them because they can't report anything. They can't write anything. Even if your chain of command asks them, I'm like, hey, was this person here? They're like, nope, we don't know that person. And so I would go sneak off them. I would tell them, like, hey, I got a medical appointment to go to. And I would go talk to this person and tell them kind of like how I was hating life and stuff like that and hating the Army. I didn't tell them about anything that was going on with like the blackmail, my family, or anything like that. I just told them like I hated life at that point. And eventually I got to a place, I guess I got comfortable enough to where I was able to confront those feelings. I'm like, and I plainly told them, I'm like, hey, I've been having thoughts about taking my life. And so, it took me like months, to find like 30 seconds of courage and to be able to say, I need help and I can't do this on my own anymore. Which is kind of weird because I did kind of, even though I got help, I still was doing most of this stuff on my own. So that's kind of a hard thing to like reconcile with, but there was like certain things I needed to change.
Yeah, because I'm a advocate. I've talked to a few people too about suicide and thoughts of suicide, and we need to in this world right now. I think that we have lost purpose, we have lost hope in some situations in life, and that is dragging youth down. It's when some of our military gets out of the service, or even in service, as there's no hope. And I always say to everybody out there, if you're thinking about it, if there's something going on, don't ever be afraid to call me if it was a friend or something like that. But so how was your hospital stay then? Did that help you, or?
Yeah, so the hospital stay is what ended up actually helping me turn my life around. It's the third floor, and normally it's like has kind of like a negative connotation, but I actually found it to be very freeing and stress free, because it took me out of the position to where like you don't have a phone and you're just going pretty much to the basics of life. And so there's no like real stress in there other than whatever you're going through in your mind. But I found it wasn't the hospital trip that helped me itself, but it was like two little pamphlets that I found in the hospital. And the first pamphlet said that not all suicidal people want to end their life. And as contradictory as it sounds, what actually is going on is that when someone says they're suicidal, it's a call for help essentially. And when you don't really see an out to your story, or when you think there's no way you can get out, and you find your story be impossible, I find that's when someone actually takes their life. And then the second pamphlet, which is the one I really ran with, was that you can have a perfectly healthy mind, but if you believe you're depressed, then your brain will slowly make you depressed. So I took that idea and then I kind of reversed it. So I was like, okay, I look back, I'm like, I know I hate myself. I know that I'm in a really bad spot right now. So I'm like, what if I can convince myself that I could be happy if I convince myself that I hated myself? And so I ran with it for about 2 or 3 years, and I completely changed like how I viewed life. And that was really what helped me turn around.
Well, I certainly believe that, because I think I try to put out something positive every day. Mm-hmm. And I believe, like, I get up roughly, right now I will get up at 4:30 in the morning, go for a walk every morning. It's kind of silent. I do think about a post that I'm going to put out. Sometimes I make one. But I also think that puts you, there's nobody calling me. I can hear the birds. I can walk in the grass. I can do whatever, which gives me a positive mindset. So I believe when you start, when you start turning and you start getting into the positive, more positive things are going to happen. Because you aren't dragging yourself down. Like, to me, like, I personally, I got into a depressive state, and when I was negative with myself, like everything's going wrong. Well, of course everything's going wrong because you're making it go wrong. You understand what I'm saying? So getting back into a positive mindset, and I understand also, like I've read and I've talked to people too that saying you're going to commit suicide isn't just that you want to die, it's that you do want to have help too. So yeah, so then do you talk about this in, I mean, you talk about it in the book, but do you talk about this to other people right now too?
So stuff that I've talked about. So I've been doing. So this is probably my 12th or 13th podcast. So I have been talking to it about people, and they get different parts of the story depending on what questions or what they want to talk about.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have been spreading it that way. But when I was actually writing the book and I was getting ready to submit it, I actually started putting it in a PowerPoint for a suicidal awareness presentation. So I've also shared that with like 200 or 300 people at a time, to where it's kind of like a summary of that chapter 1, and then some of these tools that I talked about, like when I went to the hospital, and then kind of some of my more modern views of how I started, looking at things differently.
Yeah. All right. What? And then you get stuck with me, who's all over the board and likes just to ask all kinds of questions. So, but so you get out of the hospital, and did the military? Did you go back to where you were then, or where did you go after that?
Yeah. So this is kind of where the title of the book comes from, which is answering the hard questions. And it started like before I went to the hospital. I kind of asked myself, do I want to die? Luckily, the answer was no, and I kind of came to the conclusion I would like to live before I die, because the life I was living wasn't life at all. It was just suffering after suffering. I'm like, it can't get any worse than this.
Yep.
So I kind of had to answer that before I went to the hospital, because I was like, if I go to this hospital and it doesn't work, and I come back to the hospital, I'm like, why even try at that point? Because I'm like, so I kind of made that decision like before I even went there to like actively get help. And then when I came out of the hospital, I asked myself the really hard question, because I wasn't happy for years at this point. And so I'm like, what would make me happy? So I still had like 3-4 years on my contract. I was a good soldier at the time, so they didn't want to let me go. They didn't want to kick me out or anything like that. And, I'm very thankful that they didn't. And then so I started looking at like, okay, what can I do in the military that would make me happy? So I went down to the career counselor's office, didn't know what a career counselor was at that time, looked at some jobs, and then I ended up asking him, I'm like, well, what do you do? So he's like, hey, I help soldiers throughout their career. I talk to soldiers daily. We get them to stations they want to go to. We get them to training they want to go to. And overall, we just help them with their career. And so I kind of looked at that. I'm like, I originally wanted to be a 68 Charlie, which was to help people. I wasn't getting that while I was in the scout platoon. And so I'm like, okay, I made a goal to end up doing that job. And really setting that goal, it wasn't getting the job itself, but it was like setting the goal that helped me, change my mind. But the job itself required me to change my entire outlook on life, if you will, because it required me to become like a completely different person. And I talk about this a little bit, but I'm trying to recall. So for a career counselor, for example, they are the advocates for keeping people in the Army. So we're kind of like the recruiters inside the Army. So you have to like the Army, you have to be able to talk to people, and you also have to be able to do it like from an optimistic standpoint. And so like none of those traits I had. I didn't like to talk to people. I didn't like the Army. And then I wasn't optimistic. I was quite pessimistic at the time. So I had to become a new person to like get this job I wanted. And that was part of the thing that helped me turn my life around. So from there, we got notified that we're going on deployment. And then, so I kind of made the goal by the end of the deployment. I wanted to submit my packet for this class. And pretty much the only thing I had to do was get a promotable status, because I was a brand new E5, so I had to wait like 9 months. And coincidentally, like by the time we got done with deployment, then I would have enough time. So I then submitted, so we got to the end of deployment. I was in the training room at the time. The first sergeant was my first line. And with the training room, I get to see who gets promoted. So I knew my name was going to be on the paperwork that month. So I go to look at my name, see what the first sergeant put down, and there's a big X next to my name. I was like, all right. And so I'm like, hey, first sergeant, I noticed you marked an X next to my name. He's like, yeah, we'll talk about that real quick. So we go in the next room. He's like, hey, because you're in the training room, I'm not going to count your time. He's like, we took you away from the scout platoon. It wasn't for a permanent fix. But I'm like, hey, first sergeant, I'm not trying to go back to the scout platoon. I'm trying to change my job right now. We went back and forth for like 10, 20 minutes, and pretty much what came out, he's like, you're not getting promoted. You're going to go back to the scout platoon. You're going to do another 6 months in the scout platoon, and then you can get your promotable status. And so at the same time, I'm also getting ready to come back from deployment. I started re-downloading dating websites because I realized at the time, I'm like, I'm about to come home from this deployment. I'm about to be alone again. And so pretty much within 9 months, I realized that I'm like, I just did a full lap around the track, and I'm in the same position that I was before. I'm going back to the scout platoon. I didn't reach my goal, and I'm back on these dating websites. And so I kind of got back from that deployment. I'm like, okay, decision time. And so it's like, I can either go back to exactly where I was, or I could finally make a change in my life. And so I didn't let it push me down. I went back to the scout platoon, but our career counselor was leaving at this time. I'm like, hey, what do I have to do to get my packet accepted and to get up there? And he's like, hey, if you go to this retention NCO of the year board and you pass the board, you will 100% get your packet slot, no questions asked. I was like, cool. So I ended up going to this board. It was a division level board. So 1,000 people, thousands of people could have entered this board. I was the only one to show up for the retention NCOs. So that was already points in my favor, because they're like, hey, out of 1,000 people, you were the only one to show up today. I was like, cool. So all I had to do was, not make myself look dumb, and I got the win. So they ended up liking it, and they're like, hey, we love that you were the only one that showed up. And we're like, we're probably going to make this a mandatory event from here on out. So I guess people at Fort Hood, you can thank me for that. But so from there, so I ended up getting my package submitted probably like a couple weeks after that. So, even though I got, rejected from the promotion, I kept moving forward and, completed that goal. And well, at first it was like a 1-year goal, but it ended up turning into like a 3-year goal. So it's like there were times of like stress to where I went back. And then on the dating websites, I ended up getting caught up in another scam, and it was almost identical to the age scam. The only difference was I wasn't dumb enough to give them any information this time. And then they did the exact same scenario, and they're like, hey, this person's in the hospital. Did you know that they're underage? Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, hey, I already blocked this person. I told them not to contact me. I did everything I was supposed to do. And they said they're law enforcement, and they're like an investigator. And then the thing that really gave it away, they're like, hey, give us your address so we can come arrest you. I'm like, hold up. If you're a law enforcement investigator, you would have had my address. We wouldn't be having this phone call, and you would have already arrested me. And so at that moment, I'm like, I'm going to call your bluff. I'm like, if you call me again, I'm going to get a real investigation started, and then we'll go from there. Lo and behold, they never called me back, and that was like the last time to where I actually got blackmailed. And then every time after that, even when someone from a previous chain blackmailed me, I'm like, hey, I'm not going to pay you again. I know this is a scam, and I'm going to report it to like CID. And every time I did that, every scammer like backed off, and I haven't heard from those people since.
Well, good. I mean, that's good news. That has to be a positive for you there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that moment was really freeing, because it kind of, the moment that broke me and completely destroyed my mind, it kind of gave me peace again, to where it's like, maybe this wasn't real. Maybe I'm not, the terrible person I am. But I even talk about it in the book, though. I'm like, my actions were completely unjustified, and I don't, free myself from that at all. Like, I still did it knowingly. So whether it's real or not, the principle still remains that I did it. But there's a peace knowing that it might not have been a real person.
And you know what? Everybody makes mistakes. As if you learn from your mistakes, finally. I mean, we all make mistakes, and sometimes we continue to make those mistakes, but it's because we don't care that we're hurting ourselves, like you said earlier. And then there's a point that you're trying to help people. That's what purpose is. That's when we start feeling good about ourselves, is when we help other people. So then you got promoted. And so how long are you still doing what you're doing now, or in the military?
So I actually just got out of the military. I completed 10 years, and then I ETS'd on May 5th, so about 2 weeks ago. And I talk about it in the book as well. And I gave my counselors like a year notice. I'm like, hey, I'm going. So 10 pages into writing this book, and I started it in like 2025. I was so dedicated to the project. 10 pages in, I was like, I'm going to leave the Army and I'm going to go write this book, and I'm going to let this book take me where it wants to go. And so, true to my word, I did ETS. I did get out of the Army. I don't have like any negative feelings about the Army, but it's like I believe in my project so much that I can, use this story to help other people, that I could be doing something, completely different. And then there were some other aspects about it, because I didn't want to do like another contract, and I didn't want to like lose any opportunities just because I was like in the military, so I couldn't like have, kind of some of those choices I can make while I was on contract, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And then, big thing with the self-publishing is that I wanted to keep like all the rights to where I can say like or do like anything I want, or if there's a topic I want to cover, I can cover it. And so mm-hmm. there was, there's also some of those freedoms that I like. It would be a smarter move to get out of the military, but it's not like I completely cut my ties off the military. I can still go back and I can still have these talks with military people and everything like that. It would just, be as a civilian.
So, how do you feel about your experience while you were in the military then?
Mm-hmm. I'm very thankful for it. The first couple of years weren't that great for me. But eventually it helped me learn a lot of hard lessons that I needed to learn. And I'm thankful for the Army, because I don't think I would have changed on my own. I think it was one of those situations that I had to be put in that place to be broken to force myself to change. You could tell that because I was, you said it earlier in the podcast, I was a really resilient person. So I had to be put in those extreme situations to finally break me and get me to turn my life around. And, it's the same thing when I came back to faith. Like, faith, even when I came back to that recently, that absolutely broke me as well. And so it's because I have this resilience that it's like I almost have to be put in these extreme situations to turn and to change my ideas.
Well, I find it, like I love the part of you're chasing your dreams and you're putting everything, all the effort into it, and you're not letting anybody stop you, and then you're trying to help people, which like I said, that's a purpose and significance thing about your life. And I can't, but it's amazing to me, as young as you are, that you have a focus now and you were resilient getting through that. And now you have a book wrote and you're doing what you're doing now and seeing where that's going to take you. And I mean, I know you just got it out and done. Do you have another one that you're thinking about doing after that, or what are your plans?
Yeah, so I'm about 100 pages into a continuation of the book, and the next book is going to be called Answering the Call, a continuation of Faith and Questioning. So I'm still keeping like some of the principles of the original book, but now this one is focused on my story about coming back to face some of the extremes I had to face, some of the things I had to get rid of, some of the mindsets I had to change. And so now it's kind of like answering the hard questions, but now it's going to be more based on scripture and what I found from faith.
Well, I love hearing that one. I can't wait for that one to come out, because that's very, very, very cool to hear. We didn't, I touched on, I was touching on subjects because I want people to read your book. I didn't want you to tell them everything about that was in it so they can hear. But folks, if you're listening to this, it is, if you want to hear about somebody that's been through hell and back and made their life better, this is a story that is amazing.
Yeah, I was going to say, we didn't even get to any of the explicit parts of the book, so there's still plenty of details we didn't talk about.
Yeah, I hear you. But I wanted to touch on, I knew what I wanted to touch on a little bit, but we could have went a lot deeper, and maybe we'll have another episode someday where we'll talk a little bit more about that stuff. But I wanted to get through, like, this story is, to me, of a resilience, of going through that stuff, of all the stuff you've gone, like, that is just a lot of people, you would use that as an excuse to be broke. And you didn't let it break you. And you've learned from your experiences and you become, a better person. Because I think every day we become a better. I mean, we're better than yesterday, and because we've learned something about ourselves. And this is a story that is just amazing. So tell people. I mean, we said it in the beginning, but tell people about the name of the book and then how to get a hold of you or what, and whatever else you want to tell them and about yourself.
Yeah. So I can break down the book real quick. So it's answering hard questions. Let it be the end of the chapter, not the end of the book. It's two separate titles, and I talk about each of the titles inside the book itself. The first thing I would say about the book itself, it's almost written in 2 or 3 different parts of the book. So some of the stuff I talked about, like the stories of my mother, my father, and me, that is actually the beginning of each chapter. So each chapter starts with kind of like a memoir portion, and then there's subsections of the book that happen after each memoir section, and those are where I actually talk more to the audience. And then at the end of each subsection, I present them with a reflection question so that they can actually participate in the book with me. And then, at the end of the book, they also have a journal so that they can write they can write their own answering the hard questions book themselves. And then what one of the things I love about the book is let it be the end of the chapter, not the end of the book. And the entire premise of the book was kind of built around this concept, and I turned it into a story at the end of the book. And it was like, imagine yourself that you're reading this book, right? You're getting to the part where I'm getting blackmailed, and the reason we read books is to connect with the author. We're looking for that, answer to our own life. And maybe you're going through the exact same situation that I went through. And so now you're looking for that answer for yourself, right? So you turn the page where I'm getting blackmailed and I'm about to go to the hospital. You turn the page and the page is blank. So you're saying, okay, it's the end of the chapter. So you turn the next page, it's blank again. And in that moment, you kind of realize it's not the end of the chapter, it's the end of the book, because the rest of the pages are blank. And when that happens, you take away the hope from the reader. So you take away, because you lost hope in yourself, you take it away from the reader. And so what I wanted to do when I wrote this book is I wanted to give them their hope back. And so that's what let it be the end of the chapter, not the end of the book means. And
that's awesome.
Yeah. I was going to say the original title of it was like The Untold Consequences of Suicide. It was a little more grim, so I changed it a little bit to be more appropriate. But again, they can find that anywhere pretty much online. I don't know if it's any physical bookstores yet. If they want to find me, then they can find me on Facebook. They can just look up my name, Devin Fish. I'm pretty easy to find, not too many of us. And then I also just started like a YouTube channel 3 days ago called Answering the Hard Questions. It has the picture of the cover of the book and everything like that on it as well.
Well, I hope everybody that is listening would give you a shot and get your book and listen to it or read it. And yeah, is it on audio?
It is not on audio yet. Cost some extra money to make that, so I'm making sure there's like a market for it before we, bust out another $6,000-$7,000.
I hear you there. So no, but if you get a chance to get this book, but I ask when I get to an end of an episode, usually ask one last question, and I think this could be interesting because I want to ask you. I always ask, what's the good life? So what's the good life to Devin Fish right now? Because I think it's ever changing, but right now, what's the good life to you?
Well, I kind of went over a little bit earlier, and it's kind of one of the things that I'm doing with what I did with this book, and I did with this what I'm doing with the current one I'm writing right now, is that in truth you will find redemption, and so I've been chasing the truth for a long time. And, through looking at Christianity, I believe I have found it. And so now I am living the good life with that.
Well, I love hearing that. And you know what? I would love to have you on again sometime a little later here and maybe get it a little deeper. Like I said, I kind of wanted to get a Cliff Notes out here, get people interested in your book, and then maybe after it's out a little bit, we can get into a little deeper and we can hear from the author and say, how. I mean, if I had a chance, I would love to go back and talk to Hemingway or something about some of his books and say, what were you thinking and were you going through anything? And I have other authors too, but so maybe we can get you on again, and then we'll just get a little deeper into what the thinking and thought processes were in the book.
Yeah, I would love to do that, and that's kind of what I aim to do on this like YouTube channel as well. Is I'm going back and kind of like reading the book, and I'm kind of re-answering some of those questions, and that's what I'm doing with the current book I'm working on as well. So I could always give the audience a sneak peek of that as well, and then so yeah, plenty of stories to still tell.
That is awesome because it's also like I mean, big Cody Jinks fan, and I don't know if you've heard of Cody Jinks, but he's a singer, and they did a song story. You know, they sang the song, and then they told the story about the song, and it's kind of like that with the book. So I think it would be very interesting.
Yeah.
So anyway, I want to thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate all you I appreciate showing people that you can get through things if you just put your mind to it and keep on pushing forward.
Yeah. Of course, thank you for having me on. I always love talking about the story, and then talk about faith and everything like that as well.
Well, that is awesome. So anyway, I hope you come back on again, and thank you very much.
Anytime.
All right. Well, thank you. Don't die, Rusty Nation. You keep chasing your dreams, being the best you, and don't die, Rusty. I want to thank you for listening to this episode of the Don't Die Rusty podcast. And if you would be so kind to give us a review, a like, a share, and a subscribe, that'd be wonderful, and I would greatly appreciate it. And if you would like to follow us on Facebook, we're at Don't Die Rusty. If you'd like to follow us on Instagram, it's at Don't Die Rusty. And if you would like to get in contact with me, it's rick@don'tdierusty.com. And I just want to say I appreciate everybody listening, and as usual, keep chasing your dreams, being the best you, and don't die rusty.